Well, thank you so much, Nancy and Don. It is true that the memories I have of Don Wallace are primarily from the basketball court. And I think the only time I enjoyed playing on the same court with him is when we were on the same team. He was always stronger than I was, and it looks like he still is. I might be able to outrun him, I'm not sure. I remember when we were on that same team, we once put up 127 points. We should not have done that, of course. That was poor sportsmanship, but it was fun. I would like to think that was the best team Antioch ever had, but I mean, I don't know what's been going on here for the last 40 years, so maybe not. Anyway, it's great fun to be back, and it's a great honor to receive the Horace Mann Award, which I accept on behalf of the class of 1960. I've tried to keep in touch with what's been happening at Antioch and Yellow Springs, but I'm a little embarrassed to admit that this is the first reunion I've been to, and I haven't been here since I was here 5 years ago to give the Chatterjee lecture, at which I was introduced as Moses, by the way. I think I like Don's description better than that. Yellow Springs seems to be flourishing, but our beloved Antioch, of course, has been going through hard times. I was very encouraged to meet Matt Durr and some of his colleagues in Washington in April, and to hear something of the plans to reopen the college, and of course we heard more details yesterday. The future looks bright again, and I think that Antioch will soon be resuming its rightful place as a leader in education in this country. Standing here in South Hall, where I began my Antioch experience, right up there in Coalstock on the 4th floor, I really feel like I am home. Robert Frost said, "Home is the place where, when you come back, they have to let you in." This feels much better than that to me. I'm going to spare you all the sentences that begin with, "It seems like only yesterday that we," or "I can't believe it's been 50 years since we." All such sentences are true, of course. The memories are still vivid, and the benefits of an Antioch education, or should I call it an experience, continue to pay dividends. I think I never had a bad teacher in Antioch, and I didn't realize how remarkable that was until I got to graduate school, where you can finish that sentence for yourself. Of all those who positively influenced my life, I would just like to pay tribute briefly to one administrator, one professor in my field, and one professor out of my field. The administrator would be J.D. Dawson, whose name came up several times yesterday. In general, if you're a student, it's not good to have the dean of students take an interest in you. But in my case, as a homesick, somewhat sheltered kid from a small town in Pennsylvania, I appreciated his interest and support. The professor in my field would be Al Stewart, who opened the beauty of physics to me. The professor out of my field would be Erwin Abrams, who welcomed a lifelong interest in international relations. One of my regrets is that I've not been able to keep up well with my classmates, but seeing at least some of my classmates here and seeing how good they look, mostly, and how successful they've been really does help a lot. It seems to me that our class of 1960, together with the surrounding classes of that era, represented a kind of bridge between the greatest generation, which I took to be the World War II veterans who came in especially mature and highly motivated in the late 40s and 50s, a bridge between them and the financial and racial troubles that hit the college later. I was going to say this was a kind of golden age for Antioch, but Steve Swerner already discussed that term. So let me just say, whatever you want to call it, it was a good time to be in college. We seemed to be in the top 10 then in many aspects of education, and we thought, correctly or incorrectly, that we were special compared to the rest of the country. The late 50s are viewed now as a kind of prosperous, complacent, and conflict-free time. It certainly did not feel that way to me at the time, and Antioch would never allow its students to be complacent. But compared to what followed in the next decade, the assassinations of John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the nuclear arms race, the Vietnam War, the civil rights struggle, and so on, perhaps it was something of an idyllic time when we had the luxury of focusing on books, classes, and co-op jobs rather than traumatic outside events. Speaking of traumatic events, Steve's description yesterday of the attempted suicide of a student brought back a repressed memory, which I will share with you because I think it's interesting. I had a roommate at Graywood, and I won't mention his name. He was a good guy, but he got into some trouble with the police in Springfield, and he spent a couple of days in jail there. When he got back to campus, he was rather depressed. He began to talk about suicide, and he began to check books on suicide out of the library. We should have intervened. We did not. One day, he showed up from the chemistry lab with a flask full of chemicals. And his plan seemed to be that he was going to generate cyanide gas and commit suicide. Now, from my perspective, there were two problems with that. One was, of course, I cared about his welfare. The other was he was in the low bunk, and I was right above him. Right above him in the upper bunk. Now, I didn't know whether cyanide gas went up or down, but that was not how I wanted to end my college career. So a couple of us went over and talked to one of the counselors, and we got him to get some counseling, and the problem went away, fortunately, rather quickly. There was another incident involving him. It's a bit of a diversion, but I think after 50 years, it's time for me to confess my role in the great pie robbery. This guy, this roommate of mine, was a wizard with locks. He was a registered locksmith. He viewed a locked door as a challenge. And basically, no building on campus was safe while this guy was here. The college very cleverly understood they could not beat him, and so they hired him to go into the Union building and maybe some other buildings every night and make sure that the locks were properly set. He was very happy doing that, and I think he did it well. One night, after his rounds, he showed up in Graywood with a pie, which he had lifted from the cafeteria. And he explained that he was allowed to help himself to food from the kitchen, and there were lots of pies there, and they didn't miss one. And so we had pie, and it was great. Now, you have to understand that during my 5 years at Antioch, I was hungry almost all the time. You know, and was I the only one? You know, meal tickets were not enough. I didn't have any money, and a piece of free pie at midnight was terrific. Then the second night, he showed up with another pie. And the third night, another pie. And this sort of went on and became a ritual in Graywood, and I was becoming a little bit uncomfortable with this, until one night the guys turned to me and said, "It's your turn to go get the pie." At that point, I refused. And I said, "Look, you know, maybe it's okay for the night watchman to help himself to a pie, maybe. But if I do it, it's just stealing. I'm not going to do it." And that was the end of the pies. We never got another pie. I've thought about this incident, numerous times, and to this day, I'm not sure whether I made a courageous moral stand against peer pressure or whether I was just a coward. Sometimes I think it's hard to draw that line. Anyway, arriving here in 1955, I was somewhat shocked to see how smart and worldly wise my classmates were. I guess I'd been rather protected, especially compared to the kids from New York City. I had never seen a movie with subtitles until I ventured down to the Little Art Theater, where I was introduced to the geniuses of world cinema, and I've been hooked on that ever since. There's another story about that. We used to hitchhike in those days. That's hard to believe. One day I was hitchhiking to Columbus for some reason or other, and a guy picked me up on the edge of town, and we'd only gone a couple of miles towards Springfield when he said, "I understand you have an interesting movie theater in Yellow Springs." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, tell me about it." And I said, "Well, it's okay. They show a lot of foreign films. I wish they'd show a Hollywood cowboy movie once in a while." And then he revealed he was the owner of the Little Art Theater. And the rest of the ride was a little uncomfortable. But that was how I felt about it. I remember another time, Jim Sween and I actually hitchhiked to Cincinnati to see the Cincinnati Reds play. I think we weren't even sure where Crosley Field was. I guess we had a map. But we got there about the 7th inning. If you get there that late, you get in free. You understand that? So we saw 3 innings of baseball, and we thought it was a successful trip. And then we hitchhiked back. Now, it's amazing that we could do that. It's even more amazing that we thought we could do that. So maybe the 50s were a lot different, because that's absolutely mind-boggling that you would try something like that today. Anyway, my classmates were so smart that I was convinced some of them would surely go on to win Nobel Prizes. That has not happened, of course, though I'm sure they have left a very positive mark on the world. It illustrates what students do not realize, and that is just how stiff the competition is out there, and how difficult it is to win some victory for yourself or your family, let alone for all humanity. It's not surprising that we did not know this, because children are told from an early age they can be anything they want to be and they can accomplish anything they want to, whereas it soon becomes painfully obvious this is not the case. I suppose it remains one of the great dilemmas of education, how to inspire people to have great dreams and aspire to lofty achievements without setting them up for disillusionment and feeling like failures a few years later. At least Antiochians, I think, have 2 major advantages in this regard. I think they are mostly free of the need to make large amounts of money to feel successful. This liberates them from many frustrations and many motivations to do bad things. In addition, they have a keen sense of the importance of public service and the need to serve others, coupled with the realization that a great deal can be accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit. Victories for humanity do come within reach. I suppose it's some sort of Antioch curse that I'm still trying to figure out what I should do when I grow up.